there is this little microscopic landscape that takes place within a track that relates to the geologic features in your mountains. It's how we taught the young ones how to communicate between looking at the landscape and looking at the track. And there's all these little things, these subtleties that say what it took for me to balance, how hungry I was, how tired I am, is all contained within that footprint. Am I thirsty? Is my bladder full? Is my stomach empty? Shows up in the tracks. Your scouts had the ability to interpret these things in the footprint to know who they were dealing with and what. These pressure releases were known amongst the White Mountain, the Cibecue, the Mescalero, the Lipan. As I study tracking cultures around the world, there are only 2 or 3 that even scratch the surface of what your abilities are in that. The Kalahari Bushmen being one of them. The Marab Bedouins in the Lost Quarter being another. These people that have this innate ability to literally look at the land and read it like a newspaper. You walk up and you know by a quick glance at the ground, who am I dealing with? Is that elk or deer? Is that a cow or a bull? Right? Is this the one that's going to feed my family? And so part of this initial baptism with the Kalahari is that I've been trained in this Apache tracking style for many decades. Incredible, the ability. There are some people that have the ability, because if you think about it, do you walk the same way when you're mad as you do when you're feeling good? Do you walk the same way when you're sick or tired as you do when you're fierce and you're fresh? Those tracks are different. Someone has the ability to come along and read that information. That's the simple things. Thoughts, actions are all recorded in your footprints. And the Apache were the only people that I had ever been around that had the ability to see like this. It's a gift. It's something that was passed from generation to generation to generation, instilled in the culture. And so with this inability to communicate with these bushmen, these other trackers that see at that level, I got to go out for them into the Namib Desert for 3 days on a survival situation. We told the production company at Discovery we were going to hunt scorpions, right? Because it was what we were eating at the time. They were the easiest thing to catch. And so insect tracks have an incredible ability to help age things, because when the insects move is different. So if a footprint has insect tracks in it, it gives you a time signature on who, what, where, when. And these guys, even though it took two languages between them and myself, when we got out and I started to follow them in a way, it was the way that I had learned from my Apache elders on how to read and how to follow in a line quietly. The communication transcended language, the ability inherently to know that we were speaking a common language of tracks. And I watched the way that the 2 bushmen were communicating with each other and talking back and forth about what they were interpreting, what they were seeing. And at first they tried to test me, which is normal. It happens everywhere with elders, right? Lead by example. Proof of mastery is performance of mastery. Words don't get it done, it's actions. One of my favorite quotes is, "Your actions speak so loudly I can't hear what you say." Right? You can't talk yourself in and out of this ability to see and interpret. And so the first thing that they did was they said, oh, and the interpreter's like, they say, look at these scorpion tracks here. And I looked at them and told them, tell them that's a beetle, but nice try. Right? And then I explained to them why it was a beetle track instead of the scorpion track that we were looking for. And the elder kind of looked at the other guy and gave it a and they started back again. And they rolled up and they started moving as we're moving through the landscape, and the way that they just the dance of how they moved through the landscape was incredible. And as we were moving through, they pick up another animal, and I could see that they're starting to talk about what's going on with this animal. And finally, they're bringing me in a little bit, because I've been following behind just to watch, to observe, because that's what you do with elders. That's the smart thing, is sit and watch. Be quiet and watch. And they call me over, and the interpreter says they want you to know that this is a gemsbok. And I said, Ashun. And they started moving again, and we moved for a while, a couple miles, 2 or 3 miles. We're on in and out of tracks, and onto this one, and down this hill, and over this way. And the next thing I know, they pick up another string of tracks, and they're talking back and forth. That elder's got his finger pointing, and there's can't even try it. The click language is awesome, and they're communicating by clicks and sounds, and they're talking about what they know from what they see in these tracks. And the interpreter calls me over, and he says again, they tell you that's gemsbok. And I looked at him and I said, tell them that not only is it gemsbok, but it's the same gemsbok that we were on a few miles ago. But tell them this, the gemsbok's track that we saw the first time had a belly empty of water and was headed to the watering hole, and that this is the same animal coming back a few hours later with its belly full of water and in. And the interpreter looked at me like I was nuts. And I looked at him and I said, tell them exactly what I just said. And it goes through the line. And I watched a smile come across that elder's face. And they had me step into that line with them as we moved on those tracks, because I was right, because I was taught to see like an Apache. And that's a true story. And with that, as we move through, now I'm in. Even though we can't speak to each other, we have this common language that we know. And we get down over this hill, and this is when the hand drill starts. And they're doing this combination hand drill, and they allow me in, and I'm helping them hold the board, then spin the stick, and we're engaged in this. And then he shows me how they make cordage, and we start setting traps for birds based on the cordage, and I'm asking questions. What's the bait? How far apart do we set these? What's the carrying capacity of the land? And so as it moved through, interestingly enough, now we have to go and I have to film this ridiculous stuff that ends up on TVs for people to see at a surface level, to try and get some kind of connection, right? Because we don't have anything like you have. We don't have this direct connection to our people and to our land like you do, the blessing that you have here. And so we have to have these intangibles, and these television shows are, like John Muir said, they're merely pictures of bread to the hungry. People thirst for this, they lust for this ability to connect to the earth, and yet they have no idea on how. And so I mentioned to them this connection after it all, that I had been gifted an Apache name, Nabaha. Right here in these White Mountains, in a sweat lodge right here, because the elders were concerned that I wasn't going to be able to get into heaven if I didn't speak my name to Usin, right? If I didn't have an Apache name, I wasn't getting in. And I told Ramon and the other elders the odds weren't good on it anyway, right? But interestingly enough, that translates it roughly as tracker here, which is an honor I don't deserve. And the Kalahari, after gifting that man Geronimo's stock, his hand drill, his knife, rocks and stones from these mountains, right here at Sibicu, right here at Salt River, right here at Tick Flats, the stones that we need that allow us to create every other thing that we need in our life, our shelters, our clothes, our hides, our arrows, our bows. And those elders came up to me that night and wanted the same thing. They were worried. They said, hey, in case your Apache name doesn't work, we want you to have a Bushman name too. And so they gifted me a Bushman name, and they call me Hunter over there. It's ow, somehow they have that click in their throat, right? And they gifted me an arrow, and I thought to myself, where have I seen this before? Who else gets an arrow upon receiving their adult name? Anybody know? The young man of the Apache, right? The consistencies are incredible. The common language is incredible. Think about that. The ability, you Every one of you responsible for it. It just wasn't a male thing. We like to talk about the scouts, but the crazy thing about it, when I watched this kind of still functioning in the old way stuff with their elders and the ability to communicate, their women tracked as well. As they were going out for roots to gather that morning, they cut some tracks and said, get the lazy hunters up. These are fresh, right? That they knew who it was, they knew how old they were, and they said, get them, tell them, get their bows, get their spears. Food is here, right? So everybody, man, woman, and child, this is it. You're out and about. You cut a shod horse, you cut a boot track that is cavalry or is not one of your people. You have to be able to sound that out, right? Think about your ability to have the earth whisper secrets to you. It's incredible, right? So the pressure releases are yours. The ability to track like that is yours. The respect that your elders, your word is spread far and wide, places you would never think things like that could get to. And it was based on your ability to understand these mountains in the way that you do, this earth in the way that you do.